At Christmas Time by Anton Pavlovich Chekhov. What shall I write? Asked Yegor, dipping his pen in the ink. Vasilissa had not seen her daughter for 4 years. Euphemia had gone away to St. Petersburg with her husband after her wedding, had written 2 letters, and then had vanished as if the earth had engulfed her. Not a word, nor a sound had come from her since. So now, whether the aged mother was milking the cow at daybreak, or lighting the stove, or dozing at night, the tenor of her thoughts was always the same. How is Euphemia? Is she alive? And well, she wanted to send her a letter. But the old father could not write, and there was no one whom they could ask to write it for them. But now Christmas had come, and Vasilissa could endure the silence. No longer she went to the tavern to see Yegor, the innkeeper's wife's brother, who had done nothing but sit idly at home in the tavern, since he had come back from military service, but of whom people said that he wrote the most beautiful letters. If only one paid him enough. Vasilissa talked with the cook at the tavern, and with the innkeeper's wife, and finally with Yegor himself, and at last they agreed on a price of 15 kopecks. So now, on the second day of the Christmas festival, Yegor was sitting at a table in the inn kitchen with a pen in his hand. Vasilissa was standing in front of him, plunged in thought with a look of care and sorrow on her face. Her husband Peter, a tall, gaunt old man with a bald brown head, had accompanied her. He was staring steadily in front of him like a blind man. A pan of pork that was frying on the stove was sizzling and puffing, and seeming to say, "Hush, hush, hush." The kitchen was hot and close. "What shall I write?" Yegor asked again. "What's that?" asked Vasilissa, looking at him angrily and suspiciously. "Don't hurry me. You are writing this letter for money, not for love. Now, then begin: to our esteemed son-in-law Andrei Krisenfich, and our only and beloved daughter Euphemia, we send greetings and love, and the everlasting blessing of their parents. All right, fire away. We wish them a happy Christmas. We are alive and well, and we wish the same for you, in the name of God our Father in heaven." Our Father in heaven. Vasilissa stopped to think and exchanged glances with the old man. "We wish the same for you, in the name of God our Father in heaven," she repeated, and burst into tears. That was all she could say, yet she had thought, as she had lain awake, thinking night after night, that 10 letters could not contain all she wanted to say. Much water had flowed into the sea since their daughter had gone away with her husband, and the old people had been as lonely as orphans, sighing sadly in the night hours, as if they had buried their child. How many things had happened in the village in all these years? How many people had married? How many had died? How long the winters had been, and how long the nights! "My, but it's hot!" exclaimed Yegor, unbuttoning his waistcoat. "The temperature must be 70. "Well, what next?" he asked. The old people answered nothing. "What is your son-in-law's profession?" "He used to be a soldier, brother, you know," that replied the old man in a feeble voice. "He went into military service at the same time you. Roman 999. He used to be a soldier. But now, he is in a hospital where a doctor treats sick people with water. He is the doorkeeper there." "You can see it written here," said the old woman, taking a letter out of her handkerchief. "We got this from Euphemia a long, long time ago. She may not be alive now." Yegor reflected a moment, and then began to write swiftly. "Fate has ordained you for the military profession," he wrote. "Therefore, we recommend you to look into the articles on disciplinary punishment and penal laws of the War Department, and to find there the laws of civilization for members of that department." When this was written, he read it aloud, whilst Vasilissa thought of how she would like to write that there had been a famine last year, and that their flour had not even lasted until Christmas, so that they had been obliged to sell their cow, that the old man was often ill, and must soon surrender his soul to God, that they needed money. But how could she put all this into words? What should she say first, and what last? Turn your attention to the 5th volume of Military Definitions. Yegor wrote, "The word soldier is a general appellation, a distinguishing term. Both the commander-in-chief of an army and the last infantryman in the ranks are alike called soldiers." The old man's lips moved, and he said in a low voice, "I should like to see my little grandchildren." "What grandchildren?" asked the old woman crossly. "Perhaps there are no grandchildren." "No grandchildren, but perhaps there are, who knows? And from this you may deduce," Yegor hurried on, "which is an internal and which is a foreign enemy. Our greatest internal enemy is Bacchus." The pen scraped and scratched and drew long curly lines like fishhooks across the paper. Yegor wrote at full speed, and underlined each sentence 2 or 3 times. He was sitting on a stool with his legs stretched far apart under the table, a fat, lusty creature with a fiery nape and the face of a bulldog. He was the very essence of coarse, arrogant, stiff-necked vulgarity, proud to have been born and bred in a pothouse. And Vasilissa well knew how vulgar he was, but could not find words to express it, and could only glare angrily and suspiciously at him. Her head ached from the sound of his voice and his unintelligible words, and from the oppressive heat of the room, and her mind was confused. She could neither think nor speak, and could only stand and wait for Yeager's pen to stop scratching. But the old man was looking at the writer with unbounded confidence in his eyes. He trusted his old woman, who had brought him here. He trusted Yeager. And when he had spoken of the hydropathic establishment, just now his face had shown that he trusted that, and the healing power of its waters. When the letter was written, Yeager got up and read it aloud from beginning to end. The old man understood not a word, but he nodded his head confidingly and said, "Very good, it runs smoothly, thank you kindly, it is very good." They laid 3 5-kopeck pieces on the table, and went out. The old man walked away staring straight ahead of him like a blind man, and a look of utmost confidence lay in his eyes. But Vasilissa, as she left the tavern, struck at a dog in her path, and exclaimed angrily, "Sate plague." All that night the old woman lay awake full of restless thoughts, and at dawn, she rose, said her prayers, and walked 11 miles to the station to post the letter. Dr. Moslweiser's hydropathic establishment was open on New Year's Day. As usual, the only difference was that Andrei Krisenfich, the doorkeeper, was wearing unusually shiny boots and a uniform trimmed with new gold braid, and that he wished everyone who came in a happy new year. It was morning. Andrei was standing at the door reading a paper. At 10 o'clock precisely, an old general came in, who was one of the regular visitors of the establishment. Behind him came the postman. Andrei took the general's cloak and said, "A happy new year to your excellency." "Thank you, friend, the same to you." And as he mounted the stairs, the general nodded toward a closed door and asked, as he did every day, always forgetting the answer, "And what is there in there?" "A room for massage, your excellency." When the general's footsteps had died away, Andrei looked over the letters and found one addressed to him. He opened it, read a few lines, and then, still looking at his newspaper, sauntered toward the little room downstairs at the end of a passage, where he and his family lived. His wife Euphemia was sitting on the bed, feeding a baby. Her oldest boy was standing at her knee with his curly head in her lap, and a third child was lying asleep on the bed. Andrei entered their little room and handed the letter to his wife, saying, "This must be from the village." Then he went out again without raising his eyes from his newspaper, and stopped in the passage not far from the door. He heard Euphemia read the first lines in a trembling voice. She could go no farther, but these were enough. Tears streamed from her eyes, and she threw her arms round her eldest child and began talking to him and covering him with kisses. It was hard to tell whether she was laughing or crying. "This is from Granny and Granddaddy," she cried, "from the village, O Queen of Heaven, O holy saints. The roofs are piled with snow there known, the trees are white, oh so white, the little children are out coasting on their dear little sleddes, and Granddaddy, darling with his dear bald head, is sitting by the big old warm stove, and the little brown doggio, my precious chickabit, is." Andrei remembered, as he listened to her, that his wife had given him letters at 3 or 4 different times, and had asked him to send them to the village, but important business had always interfered, and the letters had remained lying about unposted. "And the little white hares are skipping about in the fields," now sobbed Euphemia, embracing her boy with streaming eyes. "Granddaddy dear is so kind and good, and Granny is so kind and so full of pity. People's hearts are soft and warm in the village. There is a little church there, and the men sing in the choir. Oh, take us away from here, Queen of Heaven, intercede for us, merciful Mother." Andrei returned to his room to smoke until the next patient should come in, and Euphemia suddenly grew still and wiped her eyes. Only her lips quivered. She was afraid of him, oh so afraid. She quaked and shuddered at every look and every footstep of his, and never dared to open her mouth in his presence. Andrei lit a cigarette, but at that moment, a bell rang upstairs. He put out his cigarette, and assuming a very solemn expression, hurried to the front door. The old general, rosy and fresh from his bath, was descending the stairs. "And what is there in there?" he asked, pointing to a closed door. Andrei drew himself up at attention and answered in a loud voice, "The hot douche, your excellency."